Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, as you've seen there, Ambassador Yusuf Tuggar, OON, is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He joins us here in the studios. Good morning, and thank you for coming on, sir.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
So how are you settling into the office?
Well, a lot of work, very hectic, and I've come as, the Chinese say, interesting times, so, but...
Why do you think it's interesting? What makes it so?
Lots of things happening on the global stage, also in Nigeria, okay. So, but we shall overcome.
Yeah, so in terms of what's happening on the global stage and here, I know that, reading several pieces, they thought that, in the past, Nigeria had been bogged down with local issues, so we couldn't extend ourselves robustly as we would have loved to. And so, but now we see the president has made several trips internationally. So in terms of the import of all of those trips, what could you tell us about them?
Well, there have been major global events. There has been, of course, the G20 in India, which India, as president or chairman of the G20, current chairman, invited Nigeria. We attended. We had several important engagements. Then there was UNGA, as you know, which is an annual event, the United Nations General Assembly. We attended that as well. And, of course, it fits into prepared plan for the administration, which, we've been talking about the 4 Ds: democracy, development, demography, diaspora. So in terms of democracy, we're also looking to democratize the global system. We're agitating for that. So Nigeria needs to be on the big tables where decisions are taken about the global economy, about the entire planet. So that is why it's important for us to be participating in G20. Of course, we're calling for a reform of the United Nations itself, because the Security Council, as you know, you have 5 permanent members. This is anachronistic, an old thing that came about at the end of the Second World War.
What are we proposing?
Time to reform. Time for Nigeria to be in the Security Council. We are the largest country in Africa. 15% of Africans are Nigerians. We are projected to become the 3rd largest country in the world by the year 2050. It's going to be China, India, China, then Nigeria.
Are those the key criteria that they will consider?
Well, no, not just that. We're the largest economy also. We've always been a leader. We championed the liberation of African countries from racist regimes. We stood out there. I'm old enough to remember, the moniker Nigeria and the frontline states. I'm sure you are too.
I know that at that time they talked about, we always hear people talk about that. Whenever a new government comes in, they ask, so what is our foreign policy thrust? Because they seem to define it in their own way. What can you tell us about that part too?
Any Nigerian that wants to learn about our foreign policy should go into Nigeria's constitution. The objectives, foreign policy objectives, are clearly stated in the constitution. So that is the starting point. And then, of course, each administration comes with its own style, with its own ideas of how to implement, how to achieve those foreign policy objectives.
Well, big issues which I know that you have on the front, on immediately in your plate. Belly had the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration. Well, Belly was sworn in, and then the issue in Niger came up. Democracy is a very big issue across not just Africa now, but around the world. People are, having many more questions around democracy and what it delivers. But before we go to, the issues of coup, I wanted to take you up on this issue of the CSU matter and, what it does for our image, across, outside of the shores of Nigeria, because this matter has now been raised in faraway United States of America as to whether or not our president attended a university there and whether or not he presented the right certificates here. All of this, do they cast a shadow on some of the international engagements that the president has had?
Oh, not at all. We met with several world leaders. Nobody is wasting time about, certificates and qualifications for somebody who has been the governor of a state, served 2 terms, has been on the national stage as a politician. You remember the same, President Buhari had to go through the same thing, where people were actually questioning whether he went to secondary school or not. Someone who had classmates who was captain of his, whatever, he was head boy and all of that. So there's a tendency to always, try to distract, to detain people on such, frivolous issues, as opposed to facing the major issue of development. We don't have time to waste on that. And, the foreign leaders that we've been engaging and the international organizations clearly are disinterested in wasting time on such things. So we pay no mind to that. Nigerians should focus on development, and every Nigerian, because of the critical state we're in at the moment, our population growing at 3% per annum, the economic challenges we're facing, we shouldn't be wasting time about whether, some certificate, whether there's a T missing somewhere or some I hasn't been dotted. That should not be our primary focus at the moment.
You know why I asked that? Because we do know that, we know that the cloud over this elections, the last elections, are yet to settle. And as a result of that, some people are saying that it could have an effect on the engagement that the president could have with international leaders. Give you an example. When the president was going for G20 or so, we understand that he was supposed to be meeting with the US President, Joe Biden, but that engagement did not happen. Or was it on the sidelines of UNGA? I'm a little unclear now, but I do know that there was a statement put out by one of the president's aide, the media aide, saying that the president was going to be having an engagement, but that didn't happen. And there were speculations as to why that didn't happen. And they're saying, oh, maybe it's because they want the cloud of all of the electoral matters to settle before, we can now begin to see world leaders confidently engaging with the president of Nigeria. Is that correct?
It's a misunderstanding of how these things work. When you attend these global events, you have side meetings. And those side meetings are usually not more than 15 minutes, like fast-speed dating. So the proposals are made, sometimes at the last minute. So President Tinubu met with a lot of world leaders. At the same time, there were some that were scheduled to meet him that he did not meet. So it is structured in such a way that you have proposals made, and then sometimes at the last minute, you cancel. There's a world leader that was supposed to meet President Tinubu and then tested positive for COVID and had to cancel. For instance, I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's President Biden, but, these are the sort of things that happen. There was some that wanted to meet us. We couldn't because of the timing, the exigencies,
Yeah, but considering the fact that that one was publicized, I don't know if that particular meeting with the US president was publicized and it didn't happen. Do you think that it also had been a clarification as to why it didn't happen?
They already met in India. They met at the G20. They had short discussions. Like I said, it's not more than 15 minutes. Like fast-speed dating, boom, 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 in, out.
Did they achieve a lot in that kind of meeting?
Well, you have to also bear in mind that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a new president. So this is where you get to know each other, because you meet each other routinely. So in some of these meetings, they're meeting for the first time. And they feel each other out. And then, clearly there are discussions. And then they delegate. Because in each of these meetings, every president has his foreign minister sitting next to him. So we follow up. And then if there are specific issues that they want to focus on, chances are the ministers or individuals that cover that sector are also present in the meeting. And then they follow up so that by the next time they meet, you take off from where you left off.
Well, prior to your appointment, the president had to deal with the major issue of coup. I mean, in neighboring Niger, and we saw, how decisive, as president of ECOWAS, how decisive ECOWAS tried to be with regards to what had happened in Niger, imposing sanctions, and also making very, very strong statements, hoping that they will be able to, reinstate President Bazoum. That hasn't happened. The military junta is still very much in power. So what precisely is the stance right now of Nigeria within ECOWAS, to what is still happening in Niger? Has stance moved? And, there's also the question of war, and Nigerian citizens were very vehement on the insistence that, Nigeria cannot afford to go to any war with neighboring Niger.
First of all, I think war in this context is a misnomer. Nobody talked about war. What the ECOWAS leaders said was that they are taking a firm position against what happened here, and they're considering all options, including military option. Yeah. It didn't mean that we're going from 0 to 200 kilometers per hour, just declaring war on Niger. We do not have a problem with Niger Republic. Nigerians and Nigerians are one and the same. We're the same people. We have the same history, the same culture, the same background, same heritage. So our problem is not with the citizens of Niger. Our problem is with the military junta, or should I even say the presidential guard that took a president hostage. And, clearly, each country, we did not design Niger's constitution for them. They chose their own constitution. They designed their constitution. And a group of nations came together and decided to create an organization called ECOWAS and, pledged to abide by their own constitutions and then the rules laid down by that organization. And they agreed that if one of them violates it, the others must take action against that violation. And that's simply what is going on. We just happen to be, President Tinubu happens to be leading ECOWAS at the time that this happened. And, clearly, if we allow, we see the outcome now. You see what is happening in Mali today. You have insurgents, you have terrorists outside of Timbuktu, about to take over Timbuktu if we're not careful. So why is this happening? Because the military are distracted, they're pointing their guns at each other. There have already been coups and counter-coups in these countries that the military has taken over. So attention is turned on themselves, on the military, grabbing for power at the capital instead of fighting terrorists in the Sahel. This is what is happening, and this is why we are very insistent that military regimes are passé.
Well, so we think that a similar thing can happen in Niger?
Absolutely. There's tension. That is why Nigeria is insistent. Look at what is happening in the northeast. Most of the troops are now focusing on what is happening at the center, in Niamey, not in Difa. So it is in our own national interest to ensure that democracy prevails in Niger. We've seen it. We've been through this in this country, where there's a military takeover, everybody applauds and says, "Oh, good riddance," and then down the line, a few months later, people are crying. So we have experienced it, and we know that it does not work. It is not sustainable. You cannot continue to hope and pray that some benevolent dictator will come and fix your country. And then even if you do have a benevolent dictator, what happens after him? What if he dies? Who is to say that the next person is going to be an equally performative, benevolent dictator? It does not work. What works is you go to polls, you elect your leaders. After 4 years, if they're not performing, you throw them out. And even if the system is not working the way you expect it, as we go along, there are improvements. Only 4 years. But this, for a dictator, you don't know how long he's going to be there, and then you don't know if the next guy is going to pick up a gun and take over. It doesn't work.
Ambassador, loads of questions for you, but I'm not going to ask them all. My colleagues in Lagos certainly have some for you as well. Buki and Ayo, over to you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mokwe. Ambassador Tuggar, I'd like to take you up on, two components from the foreign policy disposition of the current administration, which would be development and diaspora. But let's start with development, particularly as it has to do with Nigeria's failure to put up application for membership of BRICS, following the just concluded BRICS 2023 summit. I'm wondering how tenable the Vice President's explanation would be, about Nigeria's failure to apply, giving, BRICS current disposition to rivaling the West, particularly as it has to do with their failure, to make commitments to the imperatives of the development of the global South, i.e. security, food, energy, and all of that. And when you also consider, that the new countries that have been admitted into membership of BRICS, are countries that were far behind in development, but behind Nigeria when you consider 2 decades ago.
Hello? Okay. Well,
yes, go
Nigeria
ahead.
is a beautiful bride that at the moment is highly sought after. And this gives us an opportunity to engage organizations such as BRICS, largely based on our own terms. And sometimes, timing is key. You have to look at the temporal advantages, of when you take decisions. So perhaps, when we weigh it and decide that we're not going to rush to join BRICS when everybody else is falling over themselves to join, perhaps, that might be in the best interest of Nigeria. You can see that right now there's a rush to join BRICS. It's not to say that we're not discussing with BRICS, we're not engaging with them. And sometimes it's not even so much the joining formally, but the participation. We participated in the BRICS summit, and we also participated in the G20 summit. So it's still early days. People forget that it's a new administration. So we have to weigh these things. We also have to take into cognizance our own internal prevailing circumstances, and also the wishes and the concerns of stakeholders internally and interest groups. So, there's so many variables that have to be considered. And we're still engaging BRICS. We're still talking to Brazil, for instance, and India and China and South Africa and Russia. And Brazil, incidentally, is the next president of the G20. So, some of these groups overlap, and the key issue is to be part of it, is to be involved, and then, when we deem it fit, we can formally enter into it. But the formal entry is not even so much the most important thing, but being part of it and the visibility and, being part of the decisions.
Well, I imagine that the key issue would also be beyond informal participation, being at the decision-making table as well, being part of those countries making influence in the Committee of Nations. But let's go to diaspora. I wonder if the ministry under your administration will prioritize the state of Nigerian students studying in North Cyprus. The Zamfara state government has, in fact, defended its decision not to follow up its commitment to their scholarships, which has left them stranded in that country. right now, according to the latest report that we heard about them in August, they're passing the night wherever it is that they find themselves, because the state government has not funded the scholarship program, which also covers their accommodation. And of course, you know, the state of the Nigerian students in that country in general, who are suffering all forms of indignities, you know, because, you know, they have discovered that things are not as rosy as they thought that it would be, but, you know, are now suffering all sorts in that country. So what will your administration, the ministry under your leadership, do to return these students back home?
Well, you see, this is why it's very important for the federating units, the state governments, to work hand in hand with the federal government and in particular the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There's a tendency to engage in all sorts of activities and programs abroad with other countries, such that, I mean, I've been an ambassador. I know that there are lots of times when sub-state actors and government officials fly into a country, the embassy doesn't know that they've come in. They're coming for official meetings. They engage officials of that country, or they make arrangements for scholarships for students to be sent into institutions of higher learning abroad without recourse to the embassy or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So sometimes we don't even have the information. We're playing catch up. And really the onus is on those sub-state actors to keep the Ministry of Foreign Affairs involved. And this is, I believe, one such case. You know, like you said, it is a scholarship that was negotiated by a state government, not the federal government, not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not the Nigerian embassy, but the state government. And you know, you have to try and keep track of it. Perhaps if they had involved us, then we would know about it and we would be able to react immediately, or actually even step in to try and find some sort of relief, so that the time that the students are given before they are put in this sort of situation is, you know, they give them some extension. So, you know, I'd like to use this opportunity really to urge, you know, state governments to please keep us informed so that we can continue to work hand in hand. Nobody is saying that they cannot be foreign policy actors. Of course, they can, but we have to work in unison, because once you step out the realm of foreign affairs, of diplomacy, of implementing foreign policy, then you have to work in unison, because Nigeria is a united one entity. You know, the states, when I say states, I'm talking about countries. They're the prime referent on the global stage in international relations. So they're considered to be individuals, and it is an anarchic system, as as international relations scholars will continue to remind us.
Just a quick one on that, if you can do this in 30 seconds or so. What then would be the fate of these Nigerians right now? Is there an embassy there they can go to? Who can they talk to ensure that, you know, things don't get worse, while we resolve the issue of partnership?
Rest assured, of course. I'll answer it in 5, not even 30 seconds. We're working on it. Rest assured, we never leave anybody behind. You see what Nigeria did in Ukraine, sending in planes to fly out students. And I think it's incumbent on the Nigerian media to actually highlight such success stories, so that, you know, we fill ourselves with national pride and patriotism, because it's very important. Let's sing the songs when we do well, when we perform commendably. Let us not continue to dwell on the negative. Very important that we do that, because, you know, it is what really determines the success or failure of nations. You see other nations, they do not focus all the time on the negative and just pick the negative stuff. I'm not saying you shouldn't. It's good for democracy, and that's why I continue to say that democracy is good. And so far, with all the systems of government that mankind has devised, it is as flawed as it may be, the best one so far. Even communist countries will tell you that they are democratic. So communism is an ideal. That,
yeah.
You know,
well, perhaps in the same space, Your Excellency, while we're still talking about Nigerians in diaspora, we got this information, I don't know if you're aware of it, of some embassies in different parts of the world having a shortage of Nigerian passports. We got this information that the Nigerian embassy in South Africa, for instance, it was giving only 500 booklets a month for the thousands of Nigerians in South Africa, and Lesotho, Eswatini, and so on. And this kind of reports is repeated in various parts of the world as well. What can you tell us about that, and if there is anything being done?
Well, in terms of anything being done, I can assure you that we're doing our very best. And for the rest of it, I think you've got the wrong minister. You need the Minister for Internal Affairs, and you need the CG of Immigration to come and answer this. It's a matter of demand and supply. The more passports you have, the better. It is not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that is responsible for producing passports and even the issuance. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the host. We host other government ministries, departments, and agencies in our embassy. So within the embassy, you have immigration, you have defense section, where you have the military, you know, the 3 arms of the military. And of course, you do have foreign service officers. So it is do with demand and supply of passports. So
well, the reason for that question
is something that is important to address. And
well,
then it is under a PPP arrangement, which has long existed.
Well, the reason for the question is because you talked about the embassies and the image of Nigeria and all of that. So when these things happen, at the end of the day, it's about the image of Nigeria, as Malcolm mentioned the other time. And then part of the foreign policy, Nigeria's foreign policy, as you mentioned in the objectives of the foreign policy in the Constitution, Section 19, talks about the promotion of African integration and support for African unity. Over the weekend, we had this conversation, well, on Monday, actually, we had this conversation around Empowering Tomorrow, a new vision for Nigeria 63. And someone was raising the issue of partnership or a lack of it among African countries. Someone was saying in our audience that it was cheaper to export something to Germany than it is to export it to Ghana. And so one wonders how what would be your own take on that one? How can we make things better such that economic activities within African countries can be towards what is in the foreign policy objective of Nigeria, African integration and support for African unity?
That's why we're doing a lot. Nigeria is doing a lot when it comes to African integration and unity. You forget that we have a West Africa gas pipeline that we built in 2003 that takes Nigerian gas to Republic of Benin, Togo, and Ghana. We're at the moment also working on the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline, which is supposed to deliver gas. Already we have the trunk, the main trunk. It's the project has gone very far. The Ajakuta, Abuja, Kaduna, Kano gas pipeline. We have the Kano Maradi rail project, taking Nigerian rail to all the way to Maradi in Niger Republic, and the idea is to extend that further. We have a fiber optic line concurrently that is supposed to run all the way to Algeria. So it's building infrastructure. When you build infrastructure across Africa, then you're providing immediate employment during the course of the construction, and then subsequently economic activity, because this is, you know, you're talking about Lakaji, Lagos, Kaduna, Kano, Jibia trade and transport corridor. Tomorrow, I am going to Cotonou for a meeting of the Abidjan-Lagos corridor. You know, that's another trade corridor. So this is what we're doing, and this is the essence of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And indeed, also ECOWAS. ECOWAS is an economic community of West African states. So you have these regional economic communities that are supposed to integrate Africa. So Nigeria is indeed doing a lot when it comes to that. And then some. Customs union, we're talking about monetary union. This is all, and they've actually, African Continental Free Trade Area has adopted what we have had since 1994, Nigeria Interbanking Settlement System. They're calling it PAPAS, Pan-African Payment System. It's a superb infrastructure that has unleashed all this potential in terms of fintech. That's why you see a lot of Nigerian fintechs. You're beginning to see unicorns and all of that. It didn't happen by accident. It is, you know, because of these actions that the Nigerian government and Nigerian private sector and Nigerians as a whole have taken.
What are you doing about ensuring that our embassies, I mean, you're the right minister to talk about that one, they're a lot more responsive to Nigerians? Because I know you must have heard over time how they always say they get to the missions abroad and not responsive to Nigerians, and they don't like that. What are you doing about that?
That is why we have that fourth D, diaspora. We know that we need to improve the services that we render, and we know that we need to train the staff of the embassy even better. It's important to also understand that you have diplomats that are sent from Nigeria, these embassies, but then you also have locally recruited staff that are there on a contract basis. And there's a tendency for Nigerian embassies to employ locally recruited staff that are of Nigerian origin as a way of supporting Nigerians. But a lot of the times, some of the challenges, because those that actually even interface with other Nigerians abroad tend to be the local staff, first and foremost. Now, so it's actually Nigerians, you know, having issues with other Nigerians. And there's no law that says you have to employ Nigerians in the Nigerian embassy, in Nigerian High Commission in London, or in Berlin.
You want to change that?
South Africa. No, I'm just explaining to you, because the perception sometimes is that Nigerian diplomats or foreign service officers are sent out there and they're the ones that are mean and cruel to Nigerians. No, it is a matter of training. It is a matter of also being able to let go staff that are found wanting, because they're engaged, the local staff are engaged on a contract basis for 2 years, usually. Sometimes it's even 1 year. And they're supposed to, you know, reapply if they want, and it's open for others to also apply for the same job. So, but what tends to happen is the moment somebody turns out to be a deviant, does something wrong, and you say you want to let him go, you're not going to renew his contract, that is it. You're doing so because he is Hausa or he's Igbo or he's Yoruba. I've faced that myself. You know? So, but now... And then you start having people from Nigeria calling the ambassador saying, please, he's my brother, he's my...
Are you going to be firm now and fire anyone who doesn't obey the books?
Absolutely. We have to do that. But before we even start talking about firing, is to make them understand the essence of the service that they're supposed to be providing for Nigerians. That is the... And Nigerians too are not easy, because a lot of the people we're having to deal with in embassies are Nigerians that have traveled outside, particularly in Europe, that cannot read or write. They're not literate, and they've come to apply for a passport. So it's not easy. They tend to be impatient sometimes. Sometimes, of course, the workers would be impatient with them because you have to fill the forms for them. You have to, you know, take them through the whole process of applying for a passport. So there's so many intricacies, you know, that we don't have time to get into.
Yeah, because, I mean, there are several other issues that I wanted to take you up on, but I guess we'll wait for another time. Because, I mean, how you want us to be perceived on international or global stages equally as important. But we have to thank you for coming on. We've been speaking with His Excellency Yusuf Tuggar, ON Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.